breaking free from others' opinions. Throughout my life, I was a prisoner of other people's opinions. I clearly remember the day my daughter Emily, at 18 years old, came to me with eyes shining with enthusiasm to tell me about her dream of studying art. At that time, immersed in prejudices and social concerns, I responded with a resounding no. I argued about financial stability, the job market, and what the neighbors would think. Today, that memory still brings me a bitter taste of regret. Emily, obedient as always, followed my advice and studied business administration. For 10 years, I watched my daughter wither away in a corporate office, losing that characteristic sparkle that had always accompanied her. At family gatherings, she smiled, but as a father, I could see that the smile didn't reach her eyes. It was on a Sunday afternoon during a family lunch that everything changed. Emily, now 40 years old, announced that she was quitting her job to pursue her original dream. I confess that my first instinct was one of concern, but something had changed in me too. The years had taught me that true happiness doesn't lie in pleasing others. Today, 6 years later, Emily is a recognized artist, with exhibitions in various galleries. More importantly, she has returned to being that vibrant person I knew in her youth. This episode taught me one of the most valuable lessons of my life. The opinions of others cannot be the compass that guides our choices. This liberation from social constraints has manifested itself in various ways in my life. The other day, I decided to wear my favorite floral shirt, the one my daughter-in-law always criticized for being too flashy for an old man, to go to the grocery store. On the way, I met Mrs. Johnson from the water aerobics group, who complimented me, saying I looked younger and more cheerful. I also started taking ballroom dancing classes, something I always wanted to do but avoided for fear of others' judgment. A 75-year-old widower dancing, some said. But you know what? Dancing brought back a vitality I thought I had lost. In the classes, I met wonderful people who, like me, decided that age wouldn't be a prison, and it doesn't stop there. When I decided to paint my house a cheerful shade of yellow, there were those who said it was inappropriate for the neighborhood. But the joy I feel when I come home and see that vibrant color is worth more than any social approval. My grandchildren love it and always say that Grandpa's house is the happiest on the street. The truth is that at 75 years old, I finally understood that the only opinions that really matter are those of people who truly care about our happiness. And even these should be filtered through our own inner compass. As I always tell my grandchildren, life is too short to be lived by others' rules. Recently, I participated in a family meeting where the topic was my oldest grandson's decision to backpack through South America before starting college. I saw in his eyes the same fear of disapproval that I once saw in his mother's eyes, my Emily. But this time, I could be a different voice. I shared my own story and encouraged him to follow his dreams. Simplifying material life. For almost 5 decades, I was a hoarder. Not the kind you see on TV shows, but the type who keeps every Christmas card, every gift received, every object that might be useful someday. My house was a veritable museum of material memories. Every corner held a story. Every drawer overflowed with physical reminders. The moment of change came when I needed to move to a smaller apartment after my wife's passing. I faced the challenge of deciding what to do with a lifetime of accumulations. At first, the mere idea of parting with anything caused me anxiety. Each object seemed to carry an irreplaceable piece of my past. It was my youngest daughter, Sarah, who helped me start this process. She suggested we begin by photographing the most significant objects before donating them. "Dad," she said, "the memories are in your heart, not in things." That phrase was like an awakening. We started with the wardrobe. I discovered that I was keeping suits I hadn't worn in 15 years, waiting for a special occasion that never came. I had 47 ties, when nowadays I barely used 2 or 3 a year. It was an emotional process to separate each piece, but for every item that left, I felt an invisible weight lifting from my shoulders. The most challenging part was the library. For years I had accumulated books and magazines, swearing to myself that I would read them someday. My collection of Reader's Digest, dating back to 1980, occupied an entire bookshelf. Sarah helped me photograph the most important articles, and, with some initial regret, we donated everything to the neighborhood library. Today, when I want to read something, I use my tablet, a gift from my grandchildren, which takes up the space of a single book and carries an entire library. The process of letting go extended beyond physical objects. I realized that I also accumulated commitments, worries, and even relationships that no longer made sense. I started questioning each new object that entered the house. Will this really add value to my life? One of the most surprising discoveries was realizing how the excess of possessions was affecting my mental health. Each object required maintenance, cleaning, organization. Each full corner represented one more worry. As spaces opened up, my mind also became clearer. Today, my apartment has only what's necessary, but it's much more welcoming. The few objects I kept are truly special. The wall clock that belonged to my father, the family photo collection, now digitized, but I keep some framed, and some craft pieces I brought from memorable trips. The free space allowed me to create new environments. Where there were once cluttered cabinets, today I have a reading nook with a comfortable armchair. The guest room, previously a storage for things that might be useful, is now really a space to welcome my grandchildren when they visit. This simplification also had an unexpected impact on my finances. I discovered that I was spending a considerable amount of money maintaining and storing things I rarely or never used. Today, that money is invested in experiences, painting classes, short trips with friends, special gifts for the family. One of the most important lessons I learned in this process is that our possessions should serve us, not the other way around. Each object in our home should have a purpose or bring us genuine joy. Otherwise, it becomes just a weight we carry. Recently, my 12-year-old granddaughter asked me why my house seemed so zen, as she put it. I explained to her that, over time, we learn that true wealth isn't in the things we own, but in the experiences we live and the people we love. This simplification process continues to be a daily journey. I still catch myself sometimes wanting to keep something just in case. But now I have clear criteria. If I haven't used it in the last 6 months and it doesn't have true sentimental value, it's time to pass it on. A practice I've adopted is to do a seasonal cleaning every 3 months. I review closets, drawers, and shelves, always asking myself, does this still add value to my life? It's surprising how, even with an already simplified life, I always find something that can be donated or discarded. The impact of this change extended beyond the physical space. I began to apply the same principle to other aspects of life: relationships, social commitments, even the use of time. Simplicity brought clarity, and with it a profound sense of peace and contentment. Learning to say no, a journey of self-discovery. For most of my life, the word no seemed to be absent from my vocabulary. It was as if I had an invisible commitment to always be available to everyone, in any situation. I clearly remember the day this reality began to change. It was Christmas Eve, 3 years ago. As usual, I was preparing to participate in the traditional dinner at my cousin Barbara's house, an event that had consumed my Christmas Eve for 2 decades. Not that I didn't like her, but those gatherings had become a heavy burden. People who barely knew each other, superficial conversations, and I always returned home exhausted and with a feeling of emptiness. That morning, as I was preparing to buy the ingredients for the turkey they always asked me to bring, my daughter Mary called me. "Dad," she said, "this year we wanted so much to spend Christmas just with you, at home, with the kids. But I know you have the commitment with Aunt Barbara." It was at that moment that something inside me awakened. For the first time in years, I picked up the phone and called Barbara. With my heart racing but determined, I said that I couldn't come that year. It was difficult, I confess. There was that awkward moment of silence, some attempts to make me change my mind, but I stuck to my decision. That was the most special Christmas I had in years. We had a simple dinner at home, just me, my daughter, her husband, and my 2 grandchildren. The kids helped decorate the tree, we made cookies together, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the true Christmas spirit. There was no pressure, no social obligations, just love and genuine joy. This experience was like opening a door to a new way of living. I began to realize how many other situations in my life were driven only by a sense of obligation. The book club on Wednesdays, which hadn't brought me pleasure for years. The monthly lunches with former co-workers, which were becoming increasingly an exercise in comparison and veiled competition. the weekly visits to that distant aunt who only complained about life. Gradually, I learned that saying no doesn't mean being rude or selfish. It's a form of self-respect, of recognizing that our time and energy are precious and finite. I developed some strategies to make this process easier. I started not responding immediately to invitations. "I need to check my schedule," became a standard response, giving me time to reflect on whether I really want to participate. I created a personal evaluation system. If the idea of participating in something doesn't bring me at least a bit of enthusiasm, it's probably better to decline. I learned to be honest but kind. Instead of making up excuses, I started simply saying, "Thank you for the invitation, but I won't be able to participate this time." One of the most challenging situations was with my retired bank group. We met every Monday for coffee, but the meetings had become sessions of complaints and gossip. One day I announced that I needed to reduce my participation to once a month. It was surprising how some completely understood and even confessed to feeling the same way. With the freed up time, I began to discover activities that truly brought me joy. I enrolled in watercolor classes, something I had always wanted to try. I started dedicating Tuesday mornings to volunteering at the neighborhood library, helping children with reading. These positive choices made it easier to maintain the nose for activities that didn't add value to my life. One of the most significant discoveries was realizing how my health improved. Those frequent headaches, which doctors attributed to stress, began to diminish. I started sleeping better, and my blood pressure, which had always been a concern, stabilized. There were, of course, some people who didn't understand this change. Some felt offended, others tried to make me feel guilty. A cousin even commented that I was becoming antisocial. But over time, the people truly important in my life not only understood, but began to respect my choices more. My 15-year-old granddaughter, Sophie, recently told me something that deeply touched me. "Grandpa, you seem happier now." And she's right. By learning to say no to what no longer serves me, I opened space to say yes to what really matters. Today, at 75, I see that every no we say is actually a yes to ourselves. It's an affirmation of self-esteem, a declaration that our time and well-being are valuable. It doesn't mean I've become an inflexible or isolated person. On the contrary, the relationships I maintained have strengthened, become more authentic and meaningful. Embracing our authentic beauty, a journey of acceptance. The first time I really noticed the changes in my appearance was during my youngest daughter's wedding, 5 years ago. Looking at the photos from the event, I was struck by how much I had changed. The wrinkles around my eyes, the completely white hair, the posture no longer so upright. For a moment, I felt that pang of sadness that I imagine we all feel when we notice the passage of time in our reflection. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept flipping through old photographs, observing the gradual transformation that time had worked on me. Photos from my 20s, from my wedding, from the birth of my children, from family trips. Each image not only told a story, but also showed the marks that time was leaving on my face. It was my granddaughter Alice, then 6 years old, who helped me see these changes through different eyes. One afternoon, while we were playing together, she ran her small fingers over my face and said something I'll never forget. "Grandpa, your skin is so soft and full of stories." Each line tells a little bit of your life, doesn't it? That innocent and profound observation completely changed my perspective. I began to look at each mark with more affection and curiosity. The deep wrinkle between my eyebrows? It formed during the years I worked double shifts to provide education for my children. The lines around my eyes? They are marks from smiling so much, from so many moments of joy shared with the people I love. The white hair. Each strand represents an experience lived, a lesson learned. I remember a phase when I tried to fight against aging. I bought expensive creams, researched hair dyes, even considered some cosmetic procedures. I had a cabinet full of products that promised to reverse the signs of time. One day I calculated how much I had spent on that quest for eternal youth. The amount was enough for a beautiful international trip. It was during a consultation with my geriatrician, Dr. Rachel, that I had another moment of clarity. She told me, "Mr. John, the secret is not to look younger. It's to be healthy and comfortable with yourself." We then started to focus on what really mattered: a balanced diet, exercises appropriate for my age, quality sleep, activities that kept me mentally active. I stopped spending fortunes on miracle creams and started investing in things that really improved my quality of life. I signed up for water aerobics classes, started doing yoga for seniors, and began consulting a nutritionist. The results were surprising. Not only did I feel better physically, but I also felt more confident and at peace with my appearance. One of the most significant changes was in relation to my wardrobe. Before, I tried to dress like someone younger, which often left me uncomfortable and out of place. Today, I choose clothes that match my personality and age, without ceasing to be elegant and current. I discovered that style has no age. The important thing is to feel good and authentic. In the senior social group I attend, this has been a recurring theme, especially among women. Helen, my 78-year-old friend, shared how she freed herself from the pressure of dyeing her hair every 15 days. When she decided to embrace her white hair, she discovered a natural beauty she didn't know she had. Today, she is admired wherever she goes, with her silver hair always well-groomed. A practice I adopted was to reserve a moment each morning to care for myself with affection. Not out of excessive vanity, but out of self-respect. I maintain a simple skincare routine, do light stretching exercises, choose clothes that make me feel good. I learned that taking care of appearance doesn't mean trying to look younger, but rather demonstrating self-love. Another important learning was about posture. I realized that unconsciously, I was starting to slouch as if I wanted to hide. I started physiotherapy sessions and learned specific exercises to improve my posture. The change went beyond the physical. When we carry ourselves with dignity, people treat us with more respect. Recently, I attended my oldest grandson's wedding. This time, when I looked at the photographs, I saw something completely different from that night 5 years ago. I saw a 75-year-old man who carries his age with dignity and grace. The wrinkles are still there, as is the white hair, but now they tell a story of acceptance and self-knowledge. In a society that values youth so much, accepting aging is almost an act of rebellion. But there is a unique beauty in each phase of life, and maturity brings with it a serenity that no anti-aging cream can provide. As I often tell my grandchildren, true beauty isn't in looking younger, but in fully living each phase of life. Every wrinkle, every white hair, every mark that time leaves on us is a testament to a life well lived. They are medals we've earned for having the privilege of aging. Renewing activities and interests. A second spring. For 30 years, I was part of a book club that met every Thursday afternoon at the local library. In the beginning, they were magical moments of literary discoveries and stimulating debates. Over time, however, I realized that the meetings had turned into social gatherings, where books were just a pretext for gossip and superficial discussions. On a particularly tedious Thursday, while listening to two ladies discussing more about the personal life of one of their daughters-in-law than about the book at hand, I had an epiphany. I was there out of habit, not pleasure. It was as if I was stuck in a routine that had long lost its original meaning. The decision to leave the club wasn't easy. After all, it was 3 decades of predictable and safe Thursdays. When I announced my departure, there were protests and even some attempts to make me change my mind. "But John, you're an institution in the club," they said. It took courage to stick to my decision, but something inside me said it was time to seek new horizons. It was my son Charles who introduced me to water aerobics. "Dad, you need to move more," he insisted. I confess that at first I resisted. The idea of exposing myself in swimming trunks at 75 years old seemed embarrassing, but I decided to give it a chance. After all, what did I have to lose? The first class was a revelation. The instructor, Amanda, an energetic 30-year-old, had a special gift for making each student feel capable and welcome. The group was diverse. There were people my age, some older, others younger. The warm water of the heated pool seemed to dissolve not only the tensions in the body, but also prejudices and insecurities. Soon, water aerobics became much more than physical exercise. I met Mrs. Thompson, an 82-year-old lady who decided to learn how to swim at that age. Her courage inspired me so much that I also started swimming lessons. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, after class, we formed a group that has coffee together at the corner bakery. The conversations are much more interesting than those of the old book club, perhaps because there's no pretension, just genuine interest in each other. The success with water aerobics encouraged me to explore other activities. I had always been curious about technology, but considered myself too old to learn these modern things. My 15-year-old grandson, Peter, offered to be my private tutor. We started with the basics: how to better use the smartphone, make video calls, use banking apps. The lessons with Peter turned into special moments of intergenerational connection. He had infinite patience to explain, and I, surprisingly, discovered that I still had a great capacity for learning. In 3 months, I was already shopping online, participating in WhatsApp groups, and even created an Instagram profile to share my watercolor experiences. Another new hobby I discovered. Watercolor painting started almost by accident. During a doctor's appointment, I saw a poster about art classes for seniors at the neighborhood cultural center. The classes were on Monday mornings, a time I used to reserve for organizing papers, an excuse to do nothing significant. The first class was a disaster. My hands, accustomed to signing documents and typing reports throughout my professional life, seemed clumsy with the brush. The colors mixed chaotically on the paper, creating stains that looked nothing like the landscape I was trying to portray. But there was something therapeutic about that process, a freedom I hadn't experienced in a long time. The teacher, Lucy, a 68-year-old retired artist, had a mantra she repeated in every class. In art, there are no mistakes, only unexpected discoveries. This philosophy began to influence not only my painting, but my way of seeing life. I started to accept more happy accidents, both in art and in daily life. After 6 months of classes, we organized a small exhibition at the cultural center. My watercolors weren't masterpieces, but each one told a story, revealed a moment of discovery. My entire family attended the opening. Seeing my grandchildren proud, pointing to Grandpa's paintings, was one of the greatest joys I've ever felt. The impact of these new activities on my life was profound. My doctor noticed significant improvement in routine exams. My blood pressure stabilized, cholesterol lowered, and even my anxiety levels decreased. But the most significant change was internal. I felt alive again, curious, eager to learn. Today, my schedule is busier than when I was working. Mondays are watercolor days. Tuesdays and Thursdays are for water aerobics and swimming. Wednesdays I reserve for technology lessons with my grandson, and on Fridays I participate in a storytelling group at the library, an activity I recently discovered that has been connecting me with neighborhood children in a wonderful way. The weekends, which were once monotonous and lonely, now barely have room for so many projects and gatherings. Last Saturday, for example, I organized a watercolor painting workshop for my neighbors. It was such a big success that we're already planning to make it a monthly event.